3, 2.
Okay, we've been talking about Porter's 5 forces model earlier, and I'm going to cover in this last few minutes of class that we have the threat of the new entrants here. So it's important that, like we're talking here, in order to keep our profitability in here, we find that profitability is related to the fewer incumbents they are, or sellers that are in the industry. So let's go to the next slide and we'll talk about some of the specifics that are barriers to entry. So we've got here is taxonomy of barriers to entry. One of the most important ones is economies of scale. When we're looking at almost any business we're in, we're going to produce something to sell, and there's a production run. The longer your production run is, typically you'll get an economies of that scale, or the numbers of units you're producing, that will costs will fall incrementally with each marginal unit of production. And that's essentially what the economies of scale are, and you can see why that is. You get a long production run, you get production falling, you get learning curve advantages, you develop incremental innovation in that process to make your production more efficient. And the other thing you can have also, when it's product related, if you have multiple products, you'll have multiple setup costs. The idea being you use the same equipment. You can produce a different product out of that same equipment. Each time there will be something different in a setup cost dealing with that. If you have a longer production run each time, you can assign that setup time cost, a smaller amount of it, to each one of those units. How about my next slide? Alright, economies of scale continued. We see companies that are in the aircraft industry, or like in the automotive industry, they have different brands of automobiles as an example, and you can find that they may be able to use the same transmission in one car or another. So they may only sell 1 million units of a particular car, but let's say they sell 3 million units of 10 models that'll all take the same transmission. So they get lower unit costs on those transmissions they make. Okay, my next one. Excess capacity. Excess capacity isn't especially intuitive, but it's the idea that a firm that is an incumbent in the industry has excess capacity, or capacity that they're not using. They can use it if some entrant comes into the market with capacity that they have built to drop price and make it more difficult for that new entrant to compete. What's the next one? Reputation. You've got a history of incumbent firms being aggressive in responding to entrants into the market by price cutting, by couponing, by increasing advertising budgets, whatever that might be, but they are going to try to drive that new entrant out of business or out of the market. I know you've all had marketing by this time. Product differentiation is something that I know you've studied a lot. Branding, I'm sure you've studied extensively, talked about it. And basically what you try to do with those things is make a product that is the buyer is more bonded to that type of product, so they are less likely to switch out of it and try another product. Next one. We've got capital requirements. Capital requirements are important in the regard that different industries require larger amounts of capital, and you find out that when people need to have big chunks of capital, it's harder to get. And I think that takes us about to the end of our time here. We'll pick up with switching costs next time, and I'll see you next week.